The champagne bubbles were still dancing in my crystal flute, and the scent of expensive lilies filled the air of my dining room. It was my 30th birthday. I had spent 4 years building Ethelgard, a cybersecurity firm that the industry called unbreakable, and 2 years restoring this house a mid-century modern masterpiece of glass and cantilevered steel perched on the cliffs of Blackwood Ridge. I had invited my parents and my younger brother Leo, against the advice of my therapist. I wanted one night where we weren't a family business or a disappointment. I wanted to be Elena, the daughter. Not Elena, the bank account. But the silence didn't break with a happy birthday. It broke with the sound of a leather-bound folder sliding across the Italian marble table. It made a soft, heavy thud right next to my cake. "Open it, Elena," my father said. Arthur Vance sat there, his silver hair perfectly groomed, his suit costing more than most people's cars. He didn't look like a father. He looked like a CEO, delivering a termination notice. I didn't touch it. "It's my birthday, Dad. If it's a gift, it's usually wrapped in paper, not a legal folder." My mother Beatrice reached out and patted my hand. Her touch was cold, despite the fireplace roaring behind us. "It's an opportunity, darling, for the family. Leo has been struggling with his startup, and your father and I feel that the Vance legacy needs to be centralized." I looked at Leo. My 24-year-old brother sat at the far end of the table, staring at his reflection in his spoon. He was wearing a designer watch I'd bought him for his graduation. A graduation from a university I had paid for. He wouldn't look me in the eye. I opened the folder. At the top, in crisp, terrifyingly professional font, were the words, "Voluntary Asset Reallocation" and "Residential Lease Termination." I scanned the pages. It wasn't just a request. It was a document stating that I, Elena Vance, was voluntarily transferring the deed of the Obsidian estate to a family trust managed by my father, and that I was agreeing to vacate the premises within 30 days to allow Leo to establish a stable base of operations for his career. I felt a coldness settle in my bones that had nothing to do with the night air. "You want me to give Leo my house? The house I bought with my own exit buyout from my first company? The house I've paid the taxes, the insurance, and the restoration fees on for 3 years? You have so much, Elena," my mother whispered, her voice like silk over a blade. "You have the firm. You have the penthouse in the city. Leo has nothing. It's only fair that the family assets are shared." "These aren't family assets," I said, my voice dangerously level. "These are my assets." My father leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. "Everything you have because of the name we gave you. We've discussed this, Elena. The paperwork is drawn up. It's cleaner this way. If you sign now, we can keep the lawyers out of it. We can remain a family. And if I don't, then," my father said, "things will get uncomfortable." I looked around my dining room. I had picked every piece of art. I had designed the lighting system. I had sweated over the mortgage payments when the firm was in its infancy. And here they were, eating the steak I paid for, drinking the wine I aged, telling me that I was the one being selfish. "Leo," I said, turning to my brother, "do you really want this? You want to live in a house your sister was forced out of?" Leo finally looked up. His face was flushed. "It's not like that, Elle. Dad said you were going to move back to the city anyway. He said you were looking for a reason to let me take over the estate. I need the image, you know, for the investors." "I never said that," I replied. "Memory is a fickle thing under stress, Elena," my mother intervened. "You've been working so hard. Perhaps you've forgotten the conversations we had last summer. We've already started moving some of Leo's equipment into the guest house." I froze. "You did what?" "Just the tech stuff," my father said dismissively. "The locks on the side gate were quite easy to bypass. It's practically family property anyway." This was the Vance way. They didn't steal, they reallocated. They didn't lie, they interpreted. For 30 years, I had watched them do this to aunts, uncles, and business partners. I was just the last one left with anything worth taking. I picked up the folder. I didn't tear it, I didn't throw it. I read every line. "This isn't a legal eviction," I said, pointing to the third page. "This is a quitclaim deed disguised as a family agreement. And this, termination of occupancy. You've cited Section 4, Paragraph B, of a trust that doesn't even exist." My father smiled. That sharp, predatory grin. "It exists as of 4 o'clock this afternoon, Elena. I filed the paperwork for the Vance Family Living Trust. You're listed as a secondary beneficiary." But as the trustee, I have the final say on the management of all contributed properties. But I haven't contributed this property, I snapped. The court might see it differently if they see your signature on the preliminary intent forms, he said. I felt a spike of adrenaline. What intent forms? The ones you signed at the Christmas gala last year, he replied smoothly. Among the charity auction papers. You really should read what you sign when you're celebrating, Elena. My heart hammered against my ribs. I knew I hadn't signed anything of the sort. I am a cybersecurity expert. I deal in digital signatures, encryption, and verification. I don't sign intent forms at parties. He was bluffing. He had to be. But the confidence in his voice, it was the confidence of a man who had already committed the crime and was just waiting for the clock to run out. I want you to leave, I said. Elena, don't be dramatic, my mother sighed. Finish your cake. No. I stood up, my chair screeching against the floor. The dinner is over. The family experiment is over. Get out of my house. My father didn't move. He took a slow sip of his wine. We aren't going anywhere, Elena. In fact, since I'm the trustee of the holding entity that will own this house by Monday morning, I suggest you go upstairs and start packing. We'll be staying in the master suite tonight to prepare for the movers. I was a stranger in my own home. I looked at the three of them, my creators, my blood, and I realized they didn't see a daughter. They saw a resource. The room was heavy with a silence so thick it felt like it was pressing the air out of my lungs. I was reaching for my phone to call the police when a sound echoed through the house. Knock, knock, knock. 3 heavy, rhythmic strikes on the solid oak front door. Everyone at the table froze. We weren't expecting anyone. My estate is gated, 5 miles from the nearest neighbor, and protected by a security system that alerts my phone the moment a tire touches the gravel. My phone had been silent. Who is that? Beatrice asked, her voice trembling slightly. I didn't answer. I walked toward the foyer, my heels clicking on the stone. My father followed me, his hand slipping into his pocket, likely reaching for his own phone. I opened the door. Standing there was a man in a dark gray suit, despite the pouring rain that had started outside. He didn't have an umbrella, but he looked perfectly dry. Behind him, a black SUV sat idling, its headlights cutting through the mist like the eyes of a predator. Elena Vance? He asked. Yes. My name is Marcus Thorne. I'm a private investigator and legal courier representing Sterling and Royce International. My father stepped up behind me. Whatever this is, it can wait. We're having a private family function. Thorne didn't even look at my father. He held out a thick, yellow, waterproof envelope. Actually, Mr. Arthur Vance, it's lucky you're here. This saves me a trip to your office in the morning. I took the envelope. It was heavy. Stamped across the front in bold red ink were the words, Urgent, Systemic Fraud Alert, and a set freeze notice. My father's face went from smug confidence to a sickly pale gray in the span of 3 seconds. That's a mistake. Some clerical error. It's no error, Thorne said. Miss Vance, if I were you, I'd read the second page first. And Mr. Vance? I'd suggest you don't leave the premises until you've spoken to the authorities. They're currently at your city office executing a search warrant. I stepped back into the house, my hands shaking as I tore open the envelope. Before we get to the reveal that shattered my family forever, I have to ask, what would you do if your own parents tried to steal your life's work while you were blowing out your birthday candles? Have you ever dealt with a golden child sibling who thought they were entitled to everything you earned? If this story is hitting home for you, make sure to hit that like button. It helps more people find these stories of justice. Drop a comment below with the word justice if you want to see the father get what he deserves. And if you're new here, subscribe and turn on notifications. We're just getting to the part where the hunter becomes the prey. I walked back into the dining room, the papers clutched in my hand. My mother and Leo were standing now, looking like ghosts. What is it, Elena? Leo asked, his voice cracking. What's going on? I didn't look at him. I looked at my father. You told me you were moving the house into a family trust for Leo. You told me you were doing this to help him. I threw the papers onto the table. Read the grantee line, Leo. Read who the house was really being transferred to. Leo grabbed the papers. His eyes scanned the legal jargon. It says, Vance Global Holdings? Wait. That's not the family trust. That's Dad's private offshore account. The one he uses for his real estate speculation. The room went icy. Dad? Leo looked at our father. You said this was for me. You said if I helped you get Elena to sign the intent forms at the party, the house would be my headquarters. You said I'd be the owner. My father's jaw was set tight. It's a corporate structure, Leo. You wouldn't understand the tax implications. It's for the good of the family. No, I said, my voice cutting through his lie. It was never for Leo. It was for your debt. Wasn't it, Dad? I've been tracking the market. Your firm took a massive hit last quarter. You didn't want to help Leo. You wanted a multi-million-dollar asset you could leverage to save your own skin. You were going to kick me out, lie to your son, and use my home as collateral for your failing business. My mother looked at my father, her eyes wide. Arthur, you told me this was for the children's future. Beatrice, be quiet, he snapped. But the envelope had more. I pulled out the signature verification report from Ethelgard, my own company. Here's the best part, I said, a cold smile forming on my lips. You tried to use a digital forgery of my biometric key. You thought because you were my father, you could access my legacy files. You tried to authorize the deed transfer, using a deep-fake voice recording of me giving consent. I held up a small, black device, my phone. What you forgot, Dad, is that I built the security you tried to hack. The moment your request hit the server, it didn't authorize. It flagged. It triggered a internal threat protocol. It sent a full dossier of your IP address, your location, and your forged documents to my legal team and the Federal Fraud Division. My father reached for the papers, but I pulled them back. The courier isn't just here to deliver a notice, I said. He's a witness. And that SUV outside? Those are my private security contractors. They're here to ensure that uncomfortable transition you mentioned happens. Just not to me. My father tried one last time to regain control. He stood up straight, adjusting his tie. You think this changes anything? I'm your father. No jury will convict me for a family dispute over property. We'll tie you up in court for 10 years, Elena. You'll spend more on legal fees than the house is worth. I don't think so, I said. I tapped a button on my phone, and a voice filled the room through the hidden speakers. It was my father's voice from 10 minutes ago. The locks on the side gate were quite easy to bypass. I suggest you go upstairs and start packing. We'll be staying in the master suite tonight. I've been recording since the moment you put that folder on the table, I said. In this state, recording is legal if one party consents. And I definitely consent to you going to jail. I looked at Marcus Thorne, who was still standing in the doorway. Mr. Thorne, please escort these people off my property. If they set foot on Blackwood Ridge again, they are to be detained for trespassing and burglary. Elena, please! My mother cried. It's your birthday. You're right, Mom, I said, walking to the door and holding it wide. And for my 30th birthday, I'm finally cutting out the cancer. Leo, you can keep the watch. Consider it the last cent you'll ever get from me. Dad, I'll see you in the deposition. They left. They didn't have a choice. My father tried to say something as he passed me, but Thorne stepped in his way, his presence, a silent, immovable wall. The sound of the front door latching shut was the most beautiful music I'd ever heard. I watched the red glow of their taillights bleed into the rainy mist as they descended the cliffside drive. For the first time in my 30 years, the air in my home felt clean. I didn't cry. I didn't collapse. I walked back to the dining table, poured the last of the vintage champagne, and took a slow, deliberate bite of my birthday cake. It was sweet, cold, and tasted like victory. But the real storm began the next morning. At 8 a.m., my legal team at Ethelgard activated the full suite of protective measures. Because my father had attempted to breach a federally regulated cybersecurity infrastructure to forge the deed, this was no longer a civil matter. It was a felony. By noon, the forensic audit of Vance Global Holdings, my father's firm, hit the wires. The systemic fraud alert Marcus Thorne delivered hadn't been an exaggeration. My father hadn't just targeted me. He had been running a sophisticated shell game for nearly a decade. He had mortgaged family properties he didn't own, embezzled from client escrow accounts, and used Leo's name to open credit lines that were now millions of dollars in the red. My brother was the first to break. 2 days after the dinner, Leo called me from a payphone. He was sobbing. Our father had been taken in for questioning, and the bank had already begun the process of seizing their primary residence in the city, the one I had helped pay for. Leo confessed that our father had promised him my house as a reward for helping him monitor me. Leo had been the one who stole my old ID and recorded my voice during our weekly calls so my father could create the AI deepfake for the digital deed. He told me you owed us, Elena, Leo whispered. He said you were getting too big for your own good. And you believed him because it was easier than working? I replied. I didn't hang up immediately. I let the silence sit there. I'm not dropping the charges, Leo. If I do, my board of directors will fire me for negligence. You made your choice. Now you have to live with the person you chose. The weeks that followed were a masterclass in legal destruction. My father's attorney tried to use the family misunderstanding defense, but my recordings were devastating. The court heard Arthur Vance's cold, calculated plan to bypass my security and humiliate me into surrender, the judge. A woman who had clearly dealt with entitled patriarchs before was not moved. Because the deed transfer involved interstate wire fraud and the breach of a secure tech facility, the federal authorities took over. My father's Vance legacy didn't just stumble, it was vaporized. Every asset he had reallocated over the years was clawed back. My mother, who had spent 30 years pretending she didn't know where the money came from, was forced to sell her jewelry and moved into a small two-bedroom apartment funded by her sister, the same sister she had mocked for being middle class for years. I visited the city office one last time before it was auctioned off. I watched the movers carry out the heavy mahogany desk where my father used to sit and deliver his lessons on loyalty and power. I felt nothing but a profound sense of relief. As for the Obsidian estate, it was reborn. I didn't just change the locks. I overhauled every square inch of the security perimeter. The new system used quantum-encrypted biometric keys. No more voice recordings, no more old IDs. If you wanted to enter my world, you needed my physical presence and my conscious consent. I had the guest house completely gutted. Every piece of tech stuff Leo had moved in was hauled to a dumpster. I turned the space into a sanctuary for local artists, a place where people could create something real instead of trying to steal what someone else had built. 3 months after that birthday, I sat on my front porch under the old oak tree. The notice of suspected fraudulent conveyance was framed in my office as a reminder. Not a reminder of the betrayal, but a reminder of the day I stopped being a daughter of the Vances and became Elena Vance. My father is currently serving a reduced sentence for cooperation, though his reputation will never recover. Leo is working a retail job in another state. Quy Kung. Học được giá trị của một hợp đồng thuê nhà mà cậu ta thực sự phải tự trả tiền. Mẹ tôi vẫn gửi email cho tôi hàng tuần, đầy những lời khen tẩm độc về việc tôi chắc hẳn đang cô đơn lắm trong ngôi nhà lớn đó. I don't reply. I don't have to. They thought a folder and a lie could take my life from me. They forgot that I was the one who built the walls, and I was the one who held the keys. The paperwork didn't do the humiliating for them. It provided the evidence for my freedom. My name is Elena Vance. I own my home. I own my company. And for the first time in my life, I am the only one who dictates my future. If you enjoyed this story of a birthday betrayal turned into a legal masterpiece, let me know in the comments. Would you have called the authorities on your own father? Or would you have let him take the house just to keep the peace? Don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories of people who stood their ground and won. Until next time, stay sharp and always read the fine print.